That's loud.
Maybe we should mention too, like Joel told us about the side, if they want to discuss the roadside, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, you're going to call the meeting to order. Okay, we've been asked to make a slight change here, and this is going to be very quick, and it's in response to how we're going to close off and conclude the water portion of the ceremony. And the Grand Chief's going to come up and speak on this. So Grand Chief.
Juks. Nou, kijk is toen als ze man de we hebben het op de men kunnen gaan komen als we een be en ook de maat. Naast de kijk ik het maar ook kijk eens. Kijk bang is je kot thousand chinda. So before we conclude the water portion of our ceremony from this morning, we would like to honor Josephine and the water protectors. The Anishinaabe Nation is declaring April 22nd, 2019 as Great Lakes Day. This is the day that will mark the commencement of the water walks. This day is the day to remember and honor Josephine's work that she has done and to honor the work that Autumn will be carrying on. April 22nd, 2019 is a special day to the Anishinaabe Nation and our citizens. This is a time of renewal, a new beginning, and a new life. This day is our day. The Great Lakes Guardian Council has been notified that April 22nd, 2019 will be the Great Lakes Day, a special day for everyone in Ontario to honor, enjoy, and respect. So if I can ask Autumn, Abhishek. 2020 or 2019, Jay? Hey? It starts 2019. So, Chiefs, Autumn. Congrats.
Yeah. I would just like to say that it started April 22nd, 2019, and it goes on every year from now. So, yeah. So, Bojo, Masqua Gisho Kwe Mikeza Dodem, Wikwam Kung Donjaba. My name is Autumn Pelche. I'm 14 years old, and I'm from Wikwamacong and Manitoulin Island. My first thoughts when I began to sit and think about what I wanted to say is, I'm surrounded by leaders and elders, and what can I say to them? Thinking of the role and what the work entails is something that I think of, that I try not to think of. I know I am young. There are probably people who think I am too young or just a kid. One thing I know for sure is someone special to me who isn't here anymore is my biggest inspiration, and she shared with me, and I learned from her. I knew her since I was in my mother's belly. She was our family and part of our family and part of our lives. She was my biggest inspiration and supporter. I know she still is, and I know she is here with us now in spirit because she told me she would be. First of all, I would like to say how honored I feel for being asked to take on this role of Chief Water Commissioner. I never foreseen this coming, and neither did my family. I am here today because someone dear to all of us and saw and felt a concern for our precious resource, Nibe. Auntie Ba began a journey way before I was born, and my family participated when we could in her walks. We attended many water, full moon, and other ceremonies with her. As a helper, Shkabeweskwe, I only hope I could do what she had taught me to do and be as good as she hoped I could be, and hope she smiles down on the role and work I am about to carry on. When I say I'm walking in her footsteps, I may not be on the exact path, but I'm creating my own path, and a path where my great-grandchildren will have clean water, fresh, healthy animals and plants, and fresh, clean nourishment and life for many more years. At times, I try not to focus on all the negatives, one being, will I be 70 or 80 and still be advocating for all those great Indigenous women before me? My other thought is not a nice one. Will I even be here in 10 to 15 years? Then I try not to think that my future is grim. Do I even have a future? Then I think my great-grandchildren will never get to experience Anishinaabe, Audizwin, Indigenous way of life and being. These are the thoughts that linger with me. I also think back to the day when my Auntie Ba wanted to walk and she couldn't. There are communities that use bottled water every day. How many of you today had to use bottled water to brush your teeth? How many of you drank coffee or tea this morning? How many of you live around a body of water and notice how beautiful it is and said miigwech? Climate change is an emergency. Every community, city, province, and country should take this seriously. We need to protect our Great Lakes resource. It's one of the last and only fresh resources of water for everyone. There are places that have run out of fresh drinking water, and that's pretty scary. The youth all over the world are standing up for their future and their planet. Think about when you were our age. You never had to worry about running out of water or wonder if the animals were good to eat. Now, today is the time to take this climate crisis as an urgent matter. We need water for everything, and our clean water sources are becoming overpopulated and contaminated. There is so much garbage floating on the land. Some people just don't care. Ask yourself how you can make a difference, and it could be as simple as not running water or less flushing, recycling, and moving away from plastics entirely. I also ask the leadership to stand up and step up for your great-grandchildren. My grandfather, who was 73, told me that there was no foil, no saran wrap, and no plastic when he was a little boy. None of those things existed. Everything they did revolved around storing, canning, and preserving as their lives depended on it. If they could do it, why can't we? These are some points to ponder over the next little while as our time is running out. Miigwech.
Miigwech Autumn, you certainly give us a lot to think about, and I know that often us in the South, we're very fortunate in a lot of our communities that we can turn the tap on and have some fresh water. And I pray for those communities who can't do that. And so I just say Miigwech again, Autumn, and to all the walkers who recently just came to our community as well and share that knowledge with us and share that wisdom and that education. And I know our leadership are really working hard to try and keep our sacred water. Miigwech, before we start, I'd like to, a couple of housekeeping items. I know this morning there were some little side discussions and it's really a small space and it's hard for us to hear sometimes. So I'm just asking out of respect for everyone, if you do have some little side discussions, could you just take it outside and so that everyone here and all the chiefs can hear what's going on. Miigwech. And then the other thing is there are vendors here. They're outside around to the right of the building. So please go out and purchase something from the vendors, have a chat with them and help them out because this is their living as well. So I say miigwech for that. So now we're going to start with corporate minutes and 2018-19 audited financial statements. It's in tab 1 of your binder. And so I need a motion to open the Union of Ontario Indians corporate meeting. Shining Turtle and Baron King, Chief King, thank you. So, Gary, I guess I'm calling on you.
Nora, just a comment on the minutes. We're going to defer those until the fall assembly. We were unable to locate the minutes last year. We've had some staffing changes, so it's just locating those. So we're going to defer the minutes for 2018 to the fall assembly, but we do have the audited financial statements. That's going to be in your tab, and it's pink colored, so it's easy to find. Just like to make a couple of comments before we start. The Secretary Treasurer Dwayne Nashqua was unable to make it. He sent us his regrets last week, so just like to say a few words on his behalf, and also on behalf of being your Chief Executive Officer last few years. I appreciate having a strong governance structure at the Union of Ontario Indians. We have a Treasury Board that meets with us quarterly to go through our statements. They approve all of our work plans in March before we start our fiscal year. So I'd like to acknowledge the work of those people because we do a lot of work with them, and they're the ones that review our plans, our budgets, our statements in detail, and make recommendations to our Leadership Council. So like I mentioned, our Secretary Treasurer is Dwayne Nashqua from Nipissing First Nation. The Lake Huron Treasury Board member is Hazel Recollet. Northern Superior Treasury Board member is Kyle McLaurin. Southeast is Lauren Williams. And our Southwest representative is Liz Cloud, who I believe is here today. I saw there's Liz over there. So I appreciate the work that they put into it. And I say as the Chief Executive Officer, you appreciate having a long or a strong structure that you work with. So to deliver the audit for this year for the Union of Ontario Indians would be Kevin Sanderson from KPMG. So I'll invite Kevin up now.
Thank you, Gary. I'm not going to have enough hands here, but see if this works. Perfect. So first off, I'd just like to start out by saying thank you for welcoming me here today to present these financial statements and to bore you with a few numbers for a little while here. This is my first time presenting here. You might be used to Don Garriock from our firm, who would typically be making this presentation. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it here this week, so here I am. So we'll jump right into the financial statements. I haven't seen the agenda, but I suspect I'm the only thing between everyone here and lunch today. But the first few pages of the financial statements, these would be the pages most people skip and jump right into the numbers. This would be the independent auditor's report. So for this year, you'd notice the auditor's report looks a little bit different. I'm not going to read through it in detail. It outlines our role as auditor as well as management's role and those charged with governance's role. I do want to just highlight what's on the middle of this page, which is our opinion over the financial statements that follow. And without reading it verbatim, just want to comment and say that we're presenting here what's called an unqualified or a clean audit opinion. So this is the highest level of assurance that's available under Canadian auditing standards, which means that we've come in, we've done our audit, and we're satisfied that these financial statements present fairly the operations of the Union of Ontario Indians for this year. So, with that said, I'll run through some of the highlights of the Statement of Financial Position. So the Statement of Financial Position as at March 31st, 2019, this is really a snapshot, if you will, of where the Union of Ontario Indians was at March 31st, 2019. And just to run through some of the highlights and give a little bit of context where possible. So the Statement of Financial Position it's broken down into a couple key areas. The first area, you have your assets near the top. So in current assets, the largest asset held at the end of the year was cash of about $22.6 million. That's an increase of $8.1 million from 2018. Just have this quick slide to give a little bit of context to how you got there in terms of the cash balance. So you collected some receivables from the previous year. There are amounts, additional amounts owing to various communities and vendors. There's an increase in deferred contributions, so those are amounts in cash that the union has received at the end of the year but is yet to spend. And then there was a current year surplus of about $2.4 million. So all of that together results in an increase in cash of about $8 million. The next largest asset of the union would be accounts receivable of $4.6 million, down from the previous year, $5.6 million there. These are amounts due predominantly from various funders. Just to give a little bit of context, not going to go into too much detail, but the decrease in the current year really the result of amounts owing in the prior year from Service Canada that were not owing at the end of 2019. Additional assets, so there's long-term investments I'll comment on a bit later, as well as some capital assets, $2.7 million down from 2.9, so there's a decrease of about $162,000, and that's the result of additions. The union bought 2 vehicles in the year for about $70,000, and then there's $230,000 of amortization on existing assets. So total assets, $31.5 million, up from $24.5 million in 2018. Below that, you have your liabilities and deferred contributions. Largest item in deferred contributions, in liabilities would be accounts payable and accrued liabilities. Really, this is just made up of amounts owing to staff for payroll, amounts owing to the various communities, so $5.4 million owing at the end of the year to communities and to various vendors, and an amount which is an ongoing, kind of continuing amount repayable to funders, about $2.7 million. Next largest item, deferred contributions. So these are amounts of revenues that were received by the UOI at the end of the year that relate to ongoing programming or were otherwise unspent at the end of the year. I see an increase of about $3.3 million. The vast majority of that relates to funding received from Indigenous Services Canada, and the vast majority of that funding increase relates to funding related to the self-governance and child and welfare and family services programming. So that kind of summarizes the statement of financial position. Overall, there's an increase in net assets of about $2.4 million. It's reflecting the current year surplus. And just overall, I would say the union is in a very strong financial position at the end of the year. The next statement, so while the financial statement of financial position highlights where the union was at the end of the year, the statement of operation really tells the story of how you got there. So broken down into a couple main sections: revenue, expenses, so inflows and outflows. The largest inflow, of course, government contributions from other levels of government, various government agencies. Just a quick summary here. So Service Canada funding decreased, funding from Indigenous Services Canada increased in the year. Again, the majority of that related to self-government agreement funding. See, Health Canada as well as provincial government funding increased in the year as well, where we saw an increase in funding in the areas of mental health and youth life promotion. The second largest item within revenue, sales and other. This is really kind of a catch-all grouping for anything that is not a contribution from another government. I've put together a little slide to kind of explain, what is included in that caption. It's not too detailed, but really just to comment that unlike the government contributions, a lot of the items in here are not ongoing projects. And so there were a few contracts in 2018 that did not continue through 2019, and that's why we see the dip in the funding. So revenues overall, we see an increase of about $2.6 million. Below that, we have the expenditures or outflows. You see payments to First Nations, which increased by about $825,000. This makes up about 60% of total expenses, which are flow-through payments to the various communities. And this increase really corresponds with the increase in government funding that we just talked about. The next largest item would be the salaries and benefits of staff. See about $8 million, up from $6.4 million in the previous year. Quick slide here, just to kind of show where that number comes from and why the large increase, about $1.6 million increase this year. We noted through our testing that the staffing has increased significantly in the year by about 18 employees on average, as well as in the year there was a salary review done by a third-party consultant, which was retroactive to October 1st, 2018, which resulted in some increased salaries for certain staff. Below salaries and benefits, there's several other expense captions that I don't have a lot of detail to add to, but we have conventions and travel. So these are travel costs, accommodations, room bookings associated with various programming. Below that, we have contract and professional services. So this is anything really outsourced to a third-party contractor. And then the various other expenses related to programming and administration, all of which remained fairly consistent with 2018. So overall, we saw revenues were increased by about $2.6 million. Expenses also increased by about $2.6 million to just under $37 million. Below that, I just want to comment, there's a surplus repayable in the year, so amounts that need to be refunded to various government agencies of $601,000. Really a modest number for an organization of this size, less than 2% of total revenue needing to be refunded. And much of this is outside of the control of UOI. And then the last item, to comment on would be the share of earnings losses of jointly controlled investees. So this is your share of the Fur Harvesters Auction Inc., which had a loss of about $70,000 in the year, and your share of that being 50% or $36,000. Thank you.
Are there any questions on those statements? So, if not, there's a resolution in your package under tab 6 to accept the audited statements. Chief Shining Turtle? Seconder? What's his name? Pardon? No. Chief, oh, Cliff Maness. Proxy? Okay, miigwech. All in favor? No abstentions? Carried, miigwech. Okay, now I need a mover to close the corporate business of the union. Chief Shining Turtle, Chief Collins. The bookends, okay, 1 and 2. Are you 1? Okay, miigwech. We need to open the 7th generation charity. Chief Shining Turtle? Oh, okay.
Appoint the auditor for next year.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, yes, it is. Okay, sorry, I missed a step there. We have to appoint the auditors for 1920. Shining Turtle? Chief Roy Shishiguana? Okay, seconder. Okay, miigwech. Questions? All in favor? Okay, carried. Miigwech. So now we'll go on to open the 7th generation. Okay, Chief Shining Turtle. Chief Corbier, second. Miigwech. So we'll bring you back up for that. Okay.
Okay, miigwech Nora. So I just, before we turn it over to Kevin for the charity audits, I would also like to acknowledge the board members of the charity. We have here today from the Lake Huron region, Chief Nelson Toulouse over there. Also from Northern Superior, he's not here today, Phil Pelche. From the Southeast region, we have Myrna Burnside, and she's sitting here behind Chief Shining Turtle and Chief Collins. And from the Southwest, Jim Maness, and also the manager of the charity, Jason Restool, who, there he is, I knew I saw him there earlier. So again, I'd like to acknowledge their work on behalf of the charity. So I'm going to turn it back to Kevin to review that audit, and it's in the yellow paper, I believe.
Thank you. Perfect. So in the interest of not being too repetitive, once again, we complete an audit on the 7th generation charity. And the results of our audit, again, similarly, were an unqualified audit opinion. So once again, that's the highest level of assurance we can provide. So we do believe that these statements present fairly the results of the operations of the charity for this fiscal year. So, again, just to run through kind of the main statements in the financial statements, we've got the statement of financial position. So, the largest asset of the charity at the end of the year would be a cash balance of $244,000. Really, the increase from 2018 is the result of collecting some donations that were outstanding at the end of 2018, which you see there, $46,000 at the end of 2018 was in accounts receivable. So total assets of the charity, $251,000, up from $244,000 in 2018. The bottom of the statement of financial position, once again, you have your liabilities, deferred contributions, and net assets. So you have accounts payable and accrued liabilities of about $15,000, down a little bit from 2018. Really, these are amounts payable to the UOI for expenses that are, flow through the UOI. Below that, deferred contributions, $26,000, up from $17,000 in the prior year. The bulk of this amount is prepayments for golf fees for the 2019 tournament, which is upcoming in a couple weeks. So you have total liabilities, $41,000, up from $33,000 in the previous year. And down below we have net assets, so $209,000, down a little bit from the previous year to $211,000, representing a small deficiency in the current year, which we'll talk about when we get into the statement of operations. Pretty consistent with 2018. We have our revenues. Largest revenue item is various donations. The largest donators to the charity are the various hotel partners, so Quattro, Westmont Hospitality, and Marriott. We have government contributions, so that's an ongoing grant funding agreement. And then we have sales, $95,000, up from $48,000 in the previous year. So 2019, the reason for the increase, 2019 included the retirement dinner, which I'm told was very successful. I was also told it was a bit more of a roast than a retirement dinner, which I believe earned a profit. I think you said $23,000. So a very successful dinner. Roast. So total revenue is up to $305,000, up from $266,000 in the previous year. Again, the main reason for that was the roast. So below that we have expenses. So contract and professional fees being the largest expense, $131,000, up from $111,000 in the previous year. So this includes salaries, which are paid by UOI and billed to the charity, as well as other contracts with individuals. So you have MC fees, speaker fees, that kind of thing. So then below that we have travel and meeting, event, and advertising expenses. So these are really the costs of putting on the events for the year. And then beyond that, there's the rent, office general, etc. Those expenses really make up the administrative costs of the charity. So total revenues, $305,000, up from the previous year. Total expenses of $273,000, also up for the year. Overall, you see a surplus or a profit for the charity of about $32,000, up from $18,000 in the previous year before what I call discretionary items, so the scholarships and donations. Once again in the year, 4 scholarships were made available for $2,500 each, as well as $24,000 in donations this year, a significant increase from $2,000 in 2018. A lot of those donations in the current year were kind of one-time flow-through donations, so $6,200 that was received from the Philadelphia Flyers Foundation, which was flowed through or earmarked for the Little NHL, as well as $10,000 that was received by an individual who requested it be donated to the University of Toronto, to name a few. So overall, a small deficiency in the current year of $1,400, whereas the previous year had a small surplus of $6,500. So with that, were there any questions about those financial statements?
No question, yes? You're moving? Thank you. Second? Chief Surratt. Question? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Now, what about the appointment of the auditor for March, for 1920? Okay, mover? Seconder? Chief Henry, thank you. Question, all in favor? McGuatch, carried, thank you. So I need a mover and a seconder to close the business of the charity. Chief Shining Turtle, Chief Collins, McGuatch. All in favor? Thank you.
Okay, going to move forward with the Ontario First Nations Limited Partnership presentation, and that'll be done by Pat Midabi. Is Pat here? Oh. Welcome, Pat.
Good afternoon, or good morning for another 5 minutes. Good morning, everyone. Idag säger det när kas, han säger kom när kaning, niddle the missing don't you ba? Ni säger då det. Just want to say again, thank you for allowing me to serve you on this board for the past year. Just as a little bit of a recap, on April 1st of 2011, the First Nation partners started receiving 1.7% of the overall gaming gross revenues of the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation. I think there was supposed to be a follow-up on the screen. I don't know if you got that ready to go there. There we go. So I'm already on page 4. Moving right along. So this 1.7 is based on the adjusted Ontario Lottery OLG gross revenue from the previous fiscal year. And the OLG gross revenues for the year ended March 31st, 2019 was estimated at $8,953,736,000. So the 1.7 share was estimated at $152,214,000. And the interim monthly revenue share payment was estimated at $12,684,000. The non-gaming revenue arbitration was held for 11 days in September and October of 2018, and most of you by now have been informed that the decision was in favor of the OFNLP 2008, and this decision was received on March 29th, 2019. And on April 26th, both Ontario and the OLG filed an appeal to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice on the 26th of April, and a timetable for the appeal be worked out, and we're hoping to hold a hearing in the fall of 2019. And we're having some discussions right now about trying to accelerate that to possibly be heard in October. And the anticipated distribution of these non-gaming revenue funds going back to January of 2016 will be delayed until the appeal process has concluded. The non-gaming revenue matter will be an important part of the litigation report at the July 4th AGM, which I'm sure you've all received notice of by now for the meeting in Toronto. Call letter for the nominees to represent OFNLP 2008 on the OLG Board of Directors was sent out on August 23rd, 2018, and none were received before the deadline. And a letter was sent to Ontario on March 5th, 2019, confirming that Steve Williams will be reappointed for the 2019 to 2021 time slot. And again, you'll recall that discussion, the onerous scrutiny that people were put through, to go through for that appointment probably dissuaded people from applying. But nonetheless, Steve has indicated he'll stay on until such time, I guess maybe somebody steps up to the plate to replace him. But as of the last call out, we didn't receive any potential nominations to sit on that OLG board. The privatization of, with OLG modernization plan, the privatization of gaming facilities is practically complete. The last to be privatized are the two facilities at Niagara Falls. Casino Windsor continues to be managed by OLG because of financial and political issues. The gaming revenue sharing and financial agreement was signed on February 19, 2008. It shares the 1.7 of gross revenues with the 132 First Nations in Ontario and distribute to the compliant First Nations on a monthly basis. OFNLP 2008, the limited liability partnership, was put in place to administer the revenue agreement on behalf of the First Nations. The new Ontario First Nations Limited General Partner Limited, the new GP, is managed by a board of directors comprised of representatives of the 4 PTOs and the independent First Nations. The 2019 AGM is scheduled for Thursday, July 4th at the Sheraton Toronto Airport and Hotel Conference Center. And there will be a special presentation by a former Attorney General, Michael Bryant. Just like last year, we had a guest speaker there. So, try to come out and see that. I should make a note that our territory has been pretty good. I think we're down to only 3 communities left that are non-compliant in terms of getting their audit in. And I've talked to you, some of you before, reminded you, maybe if I get a chance, I'll mention it to the 3 communities again. But I think it's very important to keep in mind, particularly as we're going through these disputes with non-gaming revenue and issues like that. My concern is that the reporting requirements for this thing are very stringent, and we don't want to give the government any excuses to say that we're not reporting, the distribution of these funds. We don't want to give them any more excuses to, when we go into court, that they could say that, we're not being accountable and complying with the required, audits that are supposed to be submitted each year. But we're doing pretty good in our region. We're down to 3, and I'm sure they will be compliant very shortly. So any questions on the OFNLP 2019 AGM report? Yes, Chief Shining Turtle. I think we have to be very concerned, particularly with some of this non-gaming revenue stuff, because that's why this whole arbitration thing took place in the first place. Was they're trying to find ways, particularly with new gaming issues and stuff, to say that this isn't part of the agreement, and we're continuing to argue, that gaming is gaming, and anytime they put forth new revenue generating schemes, we're supposed to be getting a share of it. The other areas that we hadn't been getting revenues on was some of the comps that are issued at these things, as well as the things like ATMs. Like, they're making revenues off those things. So there are a number of other things that are going on that are being discussed in that whole arbitration discussion. We had a very solid case, and when we won that initial arbitration, of course, we knew they would probably appeal, which they have. But I think, if I was a betting man, and I am, I think they've got a very weak case in terms of this appeal. So we should know some good news, hopefully, by the fall. Yes, Chief King. The non-gaming revenue has a potential through the span of around 200 million. Well, it's a lot of the revenues they receive, as I meant, just a couple of things I just mentioned, like fees they get for ATMs, retail outlets in some of these locations. Tim Hortons are being established in some of these locations now. You have to understand this is right across the whole province, and comps that they give out for hotels, restaurants, meals, and stuff like that. All these things are part of the non-gaming revenue. But they're looking at even video lotteries. They're looking at all kinds of new modern gaming methodologies, and we have to be very careful that it's like everything else these guys do in government and with institutions of the government is they're very slick and sneaky of trying to say their interpretation of what is gaming and what isn't. So we're very diligent about continuing to take them to task about any revenues that are generated. Yes, Chief. Squash. Yeah, we have to be very monitoring that very closely, because there's, companies like Gateway and others take this thing over. And the main reason, I guess, why the province got out of the, being the direct people running the facilities is they wanted to get out of pension plans and unionization of their employees and all that. So they leave that to, these companies like Gateway and others to handle. They're trying to say that the agreement that we have with them, because new players are on the scene running the gaming, is not the same agreement. We're arguing successfully that gaming is gaming, and we still have to receive the 1.7%. So I think look also beyond gaming. There's other things that are going on. One of the big things that I think is going to help with the revenue stream as well is the fact that they've expanded the Lotto Max program as well to 2 times a week now. Instead of just a Friday draw, they also have a Tuesday draw, and they've also increased the maximums of the potential jackpots on those things. So that seems to be generating quite a lot of extra money. So which we'll get a percentage of that. So besides the casino activity, it's all those other pull tabs, it's lottery tickets, all that stuff. We get 1.7 of that too. What do you mean we're hoping it stays status quo? That 1.7 is good for the duration of this agreement. That won't change. I'm saying the amounts generated is going to likely increase with the fact that they've expanded some of these programs. So I'm anticipating we're going to get a larger revenue stream as a result of that. Yes, Chief. Yes. Yes. They still apply. Yes, that 1.7 will stay intact for the duration of this agreement, and I believe it's 2031. It has to be renegotiated, and there'll be some leeway time ahead of the expiry of this agreement to look at a new one. Yeah. So Joel was just reminding me that the 20-year duration of this agreement, it'll stay and be negotiated, obviously. But if there's no agreement, the existing agreement will be continued for another 5 years. Okay, Miigwech.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, the Ontario First Nation Limited Partnership Agreement requires a motion. So if I can have a mover, moved by Chief Shining Turtle. Seconder, Chief Plain. All in favor? Carried. Okay, the annual process in confirming Anishinaabe OFLP rep is the decision and responsibility of the Anishinaabe chiefs in this assembly. Pat is putting his name forward for another one-year period. That's moved by Chief Shining Turtle. Seconded by Chief King. You also have an alternative here, and that's to nominate someone else. If there's any other nominations on the floor, I'd like to hear them now, please. If there's no other nominations on the floor, I have a mover, Chief Shining Turtle, seconded by Chief King, and Chief, or former Grand Chief, Pat Madabi is now the rep again till 2020. Okay, I'd like to call Pat back up to speak on the Sovereign Wealth Board.
Maybe at this time I'll ask Barrett O'Keefe to join me. Barrett took over the file from Amy Lickers with the Chiefs of Ontario, and has been closely monitoring daily the share value. And I'm going to walk through the report here, and I'm not going to really get into this chart. Sometimes it can be confusing, but there's just the 129 partners have this Ontario First Nations Sovereign Wealth ownership entity, and there's a couple of little side things called Ontario First Nations Power Holdings with Hydro One shares that involves the loan, and the OFN Capital Wealth Fund, which cash investments of around $29 million. Right now, the loan agreement, there's a number of shares, is 14,391,012 shares, representing approximately 2.4% of Hydro One Limited. And this was purchased at $18 a share, and approximately 20 to 25% discounts to the market price at that time of the sale. And if you'll recall, there was a negotiating team that met with the government to negotiate, getting First Nations a share of Hydro shares at that time. And the total purchase price was $259 billion, $216,216, and the term of the loan is 25 years at an interest of 3.15 fixed rate, which is a very low borrowing rate. And the seed capital for the investment fund was $29,023,890 for the establishment of the wealth fund. And there's 129 partners, as I said. So as of May 3rd, 2019, the value of the 391,012 shares was $311,997,140. The loan balance as of May 3rd, 2019 was $252,323,984. And the original loan was approximately $260 million, which makes the loan to value ratio of 116%, which we need to reach 150% before any shares are released for collateral. So 2018 saw a notable deduction in the share value. However, in December, there's a rebound, and that trend is continuing into 2019. So Hydro One's share value typically follows market trends, which is what the 2018 downsizing and upswing attributed to it. And maybe I'll ask Barrett to comment a little bit about that, if you could, Barrett.
I went ahead and skipped to the next slide. This kind of gives a better idea of kind of where things are at in terms of the share value. The first tranche of shares that Ontario released was back in about 2015, late in the year. And at that time, they were trading at about $21.75 on the market. In July of 2016, that was when we seen the bulk of the shares get put up for sale. So that's why you see that the demand was really high, and it went up to about, I think it's $26 or $27 in terms of value, and that was just that initial hype about the Hydro One shares going public, so it did drive the price up considerably during that time. If you look at the red line that begins in December of 2017, that red line represents our $18 per share purchase price. So at the time when we purchased the shares, they were already trading on the market at about $22.50. So that's a difference of about, let's say about $3 per share. 14 million shares, again, that's about $50 to $75 million in terms of value. Because of some downswings in terms of the market last year, some of you who paid close attention know that the market kind of took a little bit of a dip towards the end of last year. That's why we saw the share values go down to as low as $18.84. But that upwards trend has been continuing since December. And as of this morning, I know at one point it was at $23, I think is what it opened at today. I think we're at about $22.67. So in terms of our value, right now we're sitting at about $23 versus $18 a share of which we purchase at. So arguably about $60 million is kind of what we're sitting at in terms of our value versus what we owe on the loan, which was again our current balance is sitting at about $240 million.
Thank you, Barrett. So of the investment strategy, and there'll be more information on this when we have the annual general meeting in July. But the 29 million seed capital was granted by Ontario to establish the Capital Wealth Fund. At the time of closing, the 29 million was invested into a low risk GIC investment, and that GIC was held by RBC and matured in January of 2019. And the board of directors recently finalized a decision to invest the 29 million plus interest with a new financial institution through an RFP process. This new investment will allow the funds to earn a greater interest rate while maintaining a low level of risk. The asset mix will be items such as equities, stocks, fixed income or bonds, money market or cash equivalents, and other related investments, which will be professionally managed. And we did talk to several institutions to look at proposals of what, and we hope to have a more detailed investment strategy to you during the July 4th meeting of the shareholders. And it's going to be again at the Sheraton Toronto Airport Hotel and Conference Center at approximately 1 p.m. immediately after the OFNLP AGM. So it'll be in the same location, and when the OFNLP meeting concludes, probably at lunchtime, this meeting will reconvene as the Sovereign Wealth meeting at 1 o'clock that day. I don't think it'll take that long to go through that AGM that day. I know chiefs will want to get back to their community, so I would hope that starting at 1, we'd be out there probably by 3 o'clock. And tentative agenda items is that we'll be presenting the 2018 audit presentation, I guess confirming the appointment of the board of directors, selection of auditors for 2019, and any other business. So as I said, in 2019 objectives, there'll be an annual general meeting July 19th in conjunction with the OFNLP meeting. Financial reporting will be made to the shareholders at this AGM. The investment strategy, the Capital Wealth Fund investment will be highlighted at that point, and there'll be administration, financial management, and policy development relayed to you, partner engagement, regional updates, and a review of the management services. So that's the report on the Sovereign Wealth. Are there any questions? Yes, Chief Henry?
I'm just wondering, at the shareholders meeting, do we have the ability to comment on policies that they have? And the reason I'm asking this is when they do have services running through First Nation territories, they allow some type of formula for funding. But outside of that region, in our traditional territory, I think we need to start building a case that whenever they're traveling hydro through our traditional territories, that should be included in the wealth that is generated to the First Nations, not just the border of First Nation communities. So I'm thinking if at one of these meetings we can start looking at those policies to extend that and create more wealth for the First Nations.
So Chief, maybe you and I can get together after. I can have that put on the agenda. It's your meeting. You're the partners. It's your agenda. So just maybe we'll elaborate on that and ask you to speak to it at the assembly in July. Yeah, also, you're talking about Gord, eh?
Sorry?
You're talking about Gord?
No, the CEO of Hydro One.
Oh. Just, Barrett was just noting that the CEO of Hydro One is gonna be at the Chiefs meeting in Batchewana next week, so it might be an opportunity to flag that there, Chief. But nonetheless, if you, for discussion at your General Assembly in July, we can put that on the agenda. Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Okay, Miigwech?
Thank you again, Pat, for that very informative briefing. I know hydro's always been a big issue in our communities, and, you know, since this limited partnership's been struck up, I used to deal with hydro bills around $500 a month, and now my hydro bills are down to $70 to $80 a month, so this thing has done a lot for us. Jimmy Gwitch. Can I have a mover to accept what's been presented by Pat? Chief Mel Hardy. Seconder. Chief Thomas. Yes.
I just wanted to make one quick comment. You know, the fact that, my friend Rowley mentioned about this reduction in our hydro rates, you know, we really ask the leadership to be continually vigilant that this new Ford government don't, renege on this deal.
Okay, before we move forward, Chief Shining Turtle.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on your comments there. The issue of the reduction of the delivery charge was a separate matter that was negotiated by Chief Ava Hill and myself. That was separate of what was going on here. That was the delivery charges to the First Nations. And we argued that point that all of these linear lines are laying on our traditional territories. And at that time, the Minister of Energy agreed with Ava Hill on those comments. So let's not take all the credit in the room for just about everything that's going on. And let's remind ourselves that was a separate discussion. So, and going forward, we're assured by Minister Rickford that he's not going to interfere with the delivery charges. He looked at that first. That was the immediate thing that came up in the energy file, and he's not going to touch that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Shining Turtle, for that information. Okay, move on the floor by Chief Mel Hardy, seconded by Chief Roger Thomas. All in favor? Carried. Again, we're looking for a nomination, either on the floor, new nominations, or to accept Pat Madabi and continue in the work here. So moved by Chief Shining Turtle. Seconded. Chief Hardy. Okay, so there be a resolve. We, the Chiefs and Assembly, appoint Pat Madabi for 1 year period from June 19th to June 2020 to represent the Anishinaabe Nation. And if there are no other nominations, are there any other nominations on the floor? No other nominations? Thank you. Okay, we're going to now break for lunch, and we'll return here at 1 o'clock. Thank you.